Welcome to ASA Central Line, the official podcast series of the American Society of Anesthesiologists, edited by Dr. Adam Stryker.
Hello, and welcome to Central Line, the American Society of Anesthesiologists podcast. I'm Brooke Trainer, your host for today's episode. And today we're talking about something that affects every anesthesiologist, no matter where you are in your career, but it often doesn't get the attention it deserves. Insurance. Joining me is Robert Avin, Vice President at USI Affinity, who has worked very closely with ASA and its members to help us navigate this space. So, Robert, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Trainer.
My pleasure. So, most of our guests on Central Line are anesthesiologists, but you partner closely with ASA. So, I guess we'll allow you into our podcast. And I have, from a business and advisory perspective, very interested in having you talk with us a bit about that relationship with ASA and sort of what it means for our listeners.
Yeah, that's a great way to start. So, I would say that members of the ASA, they went to association leaders inquiring about what the member benefit experience looked like. USI, we're one of the leaders in the insurance association space as it relates to member benefits. We've put a direct focus either on validating clients' existing insurance plan. If they have a plan already, we have no problem in letting them know that, hey, this is sound, it's solid, it works. Or on the opposite side, finding any sort of gaps in coverage, trying to help members develop a plan, find the issues. And at the end of the day, really just trying to offer a competitive solution that is really catered, for the anesthesiologists themselves.
And what makes, if anything, anesthesiologists unique compared to other physician groups in the insurance space? Is there anything unique about what you're offering to anesthesiologists compared to the other physician groups?
Depending on the coverage themselves, I'll take disability, for example, having a very specific language on there regarding own occupation, for example, will be very unique. You don't want to have a disability policy that is too vague. Anesthesiologists work so hard in their schooling to get to where they're at. If they go out on disability, for example, they don't want to do something that is not specific to their career. Vague disability insurance plans, for example, will say, hey, if you're able to work something, you're able to do anything there. But having something like an own occupation language is going to be very critical, and it relates to the anesthesiologists themselves.
That makes sense. And we all have to have insurance, but I don't think many of us spend that much time thinking about it. So if you could, what are the key types of insurance that anesthesiologists should be thinking about, both personally and professionally?
Yeah, great question. So I would say we have two buckets that we're offering members protection. So the first is for their personal situation. Perhaps they have a family, maybe they're looking to have children, make sure that children get to go to college, things of that nature. And then there's the practice, right? So on the individual side, we have our individual benefits offering that will offer coverage solutions in the life and health space. We do dental and vision insurance, life insurance, disability insurance. And then on the practice side, we have coverage that will protect members against claims of negligence or medical errors. So ASA members want to focus on caring for their patients. That's their number one priority. The ASA insurance program focuses on taking care of the ASA members themselves, and that's our number one priority.
I think that's a really good point, and it brings up for me the difference between what employers provide and what physicians actually need. So I'm guessing you guys are able to tailor that a little bit more specifically than even what your employer is able to do.
Yeah, and not only tailor it, I think one of the unique value adds that USI is able to provide to this program is beyond just very tailored solutions. We do have in-house advisors that members are able to review their own personal situations. We're able to take a look at an employer plan and really go through the nuances of that plan and really dissect it for what it is and then see if there are any gaps after that. And if there are, we'll be happy to point those out to the members.
And does the need for insurance evolve throughout our careers, or is it relatively static?
Yeah, I would absolutely say that it's evolving throughout the career. In my world, insurance is not a one size fits all. So you have new members that are just maybe starting out their career versus those that are in the midst of their careers. And then there's others that are in the latter years of practice, right? You have members that work in hospitals. You have members that have their own private practice. You have 1099. You have some that are fully retired, others that are doing part-time. At the end of the day, what is the member's lifestyle? Those, for example, that maybe have a little longer career runway, they're going to want to rely more on life insurance and disability and all of those personally individual products. Those that are nearing the end of their careers, they want to maybe focus on different things, maybe a nest egg. Perhaps travel insurance becomes important to them as they begin to go traveling, for example. Long-term care solutions become more critical.
I'm curious what the biggest mistakes you might see if people just kind of forget about their coverage and don't adjust it over time. And then my follow-up question to that is, how often do you recommend someone realistically review their insurance portfolio over time?
Sure. I would tell you doing an annual insurance review is ordinarily recommended. There's also going to be key milestones that will trigger a review. Somebody gets married, or somebody has a child, maybe opening up your own practice. Any sort of major changes in the trajectory of the career will certainly trigger a review there.
What are some of the biggest mistakes you see when they don't do this? Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I would say the gap becomes very large and glaring. Think about when you're first starting out. When I first started out, I thought maybe like 1 or 2 time multiple of my salary was good in life insurance. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, now I have 2 children. I want to make sure that if something happens to me, that they're able to go to college and have every bit of the same experiences that I had. I want to make sure that my house is paid off and that my spouse doesn't have to worry about changing lifestyle. When the insurance reviews are not conducted on any sort of regular basis, those are the things that become at risk and could be exposed.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you talked about the evolution, at different time points in an anesthesiologist's career. So let's just kind of go back to the beginning and start with our trainees. So what advice would you give medical students or residents who are thinking about insurance, and what offerings you would suggest for them?
Yeah, the best piece of advice for the students is focus on their profession, right? Students are ordinarily covered through their university's malpractice coverage. Once they settle in a role, that's when the insurance options become certainly much more critical. When it comes to career pathing, that's when insurance should start to become top of mind. But in the med student phase, insurance is probably off in the distance at that point.
So it's interesting to hear your perspective on this. I remember as a medical student being told you have to lock in your insurability. You got to get in early. Are there discounts or some type of advantage to getting in early? Or like you said, you just focus on your career at this point. You're most likely covered and you can talk about this as an early career.
Yeah. So when you hear that reference, it's often referring to the fact that as you become older, life insurance becomes more expensive. There's a price as every year you blow out the candles on the birthday cake, insurance becomes more costly at that point. You're never going to be healthier, younger than you are now. And that's where locking in your insurability comes into place. Also mindful that there's only so much capital that these med students have available. So I think the most important thing at that point is once the career path becomes set forth, these insurance solutions really become key to future success there.
Yeah. Okay. So moving along in the career path, what about the anesthesiologists who have just finished their training? They're starting their first job, maybe even starting a family. So what should they expect from employers, or even if they're looking at this on their own with ASA when it comes to insurance?
Earlier on, I mentioned disability insurance, for example, right? So statistically speaking, 1 in 4 will have a disability at some point in their lifetime in the workforce here. The average disability will last almost 3 years. If you work in the hospital system, yes, historically, employees will receive some sort of disability insurance as an employee benefit. But looking through the fine print is really key. So, for example, most employer groups, as it relates to disability insurance, only cover base salary. There's ordinarily a limit or a maximum benefit that an employee is able to receive during a disability claim. Those that are on claim and are receiving a disability benefit, those are ordinarily a taxable event to the anesthesiologist. So when we start to break down, hey, yes, you get it, but there's a max and it only covers base salaries and it's also taxable, then the question then becomes, well, are you able to meet all of your financial responsibilities for a month, for 6 months, for a year, or if it's like the average, for 3 years? So if an anesthesiologist, for example, is jumping right into a private practice or maybe going into a 1099 capacity, knowing the ins and outs of medical malpractice insurance is critical.
So we talked a little bit about the disability. What is the difference between group versus individual disability? And does that matter?
It does matter. I would say we work with a lot of our individual benefits in the group space, and there's certain advantages to getting a group policy. We also have individual products that if it's not available through a group solution, perhaps somebody does not fit the underwriting criteria that has been established for a group, we can certainly look at the individual benefits perspective as well, and then everybody's kind of rated on their own. But we always try to offer the group solution first, and historically that has been most beneficial for our association partners.
So then assuming that through ASA, it's a group disability policy.
That's exactly right.
Okay. And so when we kind of move along the spectrum, our career spectrum, marching along here to our mid to late career anesthesiologist, what kind of different issues tend to come up? And then how do those needs change and evolve to meet what kind of insurance they may need?
I would say during mid-career, that's one of those forks in the road where you're like, hey, should I perhaps change positions, right? Do I want to maybe go out on my own? Am I interested perhaps in joining maybe another employer group? This is the issue when the physician really starts to learn about malpractice that's provided to them via their contract, right? If they go out on their own, what do I need? Yes, I guess I recognize at this point I need my own life insurance, I need disability insurance, I need health insurance, and I'm responsible for getting all that on my own. Later on in the career, I would definitely say that tail coverage becomes top of mind. So tail coverage is malpractice insurance for claims made policies that cover incidents that occur in the past, but they're reported after the policy ends. So perhaps there's some sort of a claim that happened or is filed or maybe during retirement or during a job change. This tail coverage will protect against lawsuits that are filed after a policy expires. And at the end of the day, it will prevent out-of-pocket costs for any sort of lawsuits. If that happens, who's going to pay for the tail coverage if I leave my group? How much is tail coverage? What are the requirements for me to earn a free tail coverage? Is it partial during my retirement? Is it full? Can I work after I get this tail coverage? So those are all things that those are the issues that really start to develop mid to late career.
I mean, those are great questions that I feel like we all should be asking when reviewing these policies and contracts. Can you touch a little bit upon asset protection and estate considerations? Is that in the domain of coverage or is that beyond this?
So we are not going to create trusts or anything of that nature. But I would say, to your point, asset protection we're always looking at to see like, all right, if one of our members needs life insurance, for example, let's look at some sort of a multiple of, somebody's insurance. Historically, you could argue that 2 to 6% of your salary should probably devoted to some sort of asset protection. But that also means that you're able to keep, somewhere between 94 and 98% of your salary to do other things, right? But that's all we do. Yeah, we want to make sure that your salaries are covered so you can pay your bills. And then if there's a catastrophic loss, how does your family keep going in that event?
Another sector, I think, in this stage of your career that comes to mind are those that own their practice or own their business or partners in their group. And one thought for me is there other offerings that are particularly important for these folks that are owners of their practice, owners of their business, like general liability, things like that?
Yeah. So as an owner of the business, you're wearing many hats often. Sometimes you're the manager, you're the owner, you're the employee all at the same time. Making sure that you have the proper coverage from a malpractice perspective is critical. Maybe there's opportunities for what we would call executive benefits. Maybe there's buy-sell agreements. Perhaps there are a key person. If I have a key member of my staff and perhaps the loss of that employee from a financial perspective could be catastrophic to my business, having some sort of a life insurance policy or a key person policy has historically mitigated those types of losses.
Yeah, exactly. Now moving along to retirement and those anesthesiologists approaching or entering their retirement, what should they be thinking about? I think especially when it comes to Medicare or long-term care, which you touched upon a bit.
Everybody's different. But with long-term care, for example, what is the right solution? In my world, we have standalone long-term care policies. There are life policies with long-term care riders. We've all seen the television commercials that are talking about Medicare. You want to ask questions, right? But you don't know what could be a trusted source. So I would say that's where the ASA insurance program will really come into play.
And do you really think long-term care insurance is still worth it today? I mean, is it really something? I'm talking to an insurance guy when I ask that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you from even just personal experience, long-term care could cost anywhere between $9,000 and $16,000 a month, depending on what type of facility and care somebody's looking for. I have 2 kids. I don't want them to have to take care of me if a situation should happen like that. Folks are living longer. Having some sort of a long-term care plan, I would say, is an essential piece to a very sound and robust insurance plan. So absolutely.
And you think, retirement stages is kind of a good time to start planning for that policy?
Actually, I would tell you that most long-term care conversations should really start right around the age of 50. I would tell you that somewhere between 50 and 58 seem to be the sweet spot. I think once you start getting into those retirement ages, it really becomes a very cost prohibitive solution. And that's when folks really just kind of throw their hands up in the air and say, hey, you know what, this may not be for me. It's so expensive. Is it really worth it? But when you start looking at it, kind of that mid-career point, doesn't mean you have to pull the trigger right away, but being educated, I think, is key. And that's one of the things that I think we really pride ourselves on. Just beyond speaking to advisors, we're always conducting webinars. We do attend various trade shows through the ASA and conferences, and having a presence there and being able just to ask questions, I think is big.
Okay, yeah. And I just want to pivot a bit and talk a little bit more specifically about our locums docs, our 1099 docs. You definitely hit some high points talking about the malpractice coverage, but I think it's worth reiterating because I feel like this is a group of physicians who really are exposed and vulnerable to being underinsured. So if you could maybe talk to this group a bit.
Yeah. So these are folks that dictate their own schedule, right?
Mhm.
But you're also on your own as it relates to these Fortune 500 benefits. So you are responsible for covering all of your disability costs. There is no, hey, you get 1 times your salary as it relates to life insurance benefit. You're going to want a policy that covers all of the services that you provide. We spoke a couple of minutes ago about wearing multiple hats. This is the epitome of it, right? So having some sort of a personal and practice insurance, those responsibilities all fall on the 1099 worker. You want to make sure that you have a trusted resource to help navigate through those waters. And that's where the ASA insurance program comes in.
Yeah. And some blind spots. These are things that most physicians don't consider about insurance. Is there something that you wish more anesthesiologists understood about insurance, like to prevent expensive mistakes? Like, what are some of the most expensive mistakes you've seen?
Yeah. So I would say basically, what are the restrictions to the coverage? So how does my employment contract impact my insurance? What does my insurance cover? Does it cover my location? Does it cover my solo owned entity? If I have employees, does my policy cover them? Am I limited to the number of hours that I can work? How about this one? How can I best keep my premiums affordable, right? But also have a comprehensive solution that protects me and my practice. So those are all things I wish that we all understood better.
So, how do you know if you need more insurance? And then, what is the one thing that every anesthesiologist should be checking like this week after hearing this podcast?
Yeah. So I would say regularly scheduled insurance reviews are key, right? So part of the value of the membership in using USI as a resource, I mentioned earlier, we have no problem validating the insurance plan that our members have. If somebody brings together a plan and say, hey, this is what I'm looking to cover, this is what I already have in place, we are the first to say, this is sound, this looks like it's in good shape, don't change a thing. And that is as good as anything. Yeah, we feel really good about ourselves when we're able to deliver those types of messages. Conversely, if you don't have a plan or you haven't looked at your plan in a while, I would tell you that often that there are gaps in the solutions that you have. We're able to diagnose those issues and we're able to offer solutions. So that would, I would say, be the biggest takeaway. If you could schedule a time to 15-minute consultation with one of our advisors, that would be the best 15 minutes you spent in a while.
And I love that you have the support to look at even the policies they already have put into place, that you offer that, it sounds like free of charge to the members, to say, no, this is good, a review of that, and then here's where you see the gaps. That's a really cool benefit. Because that's one thing I think as an anesthesiologist, from I think our perspective, we don't want to be sold, we don't want to
Right.
be like some pushy salesman pushing us to get more and more and more. So having that sort of member benefit where you can bring what you have to the table and you can review it and say, okay, this is good, this is not good, this is where your gaps are, is really nice and helpful. You feel like they're on your side.
I agree.
So before I let you go, thank you so much for joining us today, by the way. Can you tell our listeners how they can learn more about your work with ASA?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, doctor, thank you so much for having us. Best thing we could do, go visit the asainsurance.com website. Every member of the association is able to take advantage of this insurance program. Feel free to use us as a starting point. Again, we're happy to be a resource in your insurance planning. We have a direct phone number that you can call. You can schedule a time that works within your calendar. You can do that right online, and we'd be happy to connect with you.
And I'm a testament to that because I did go on to that website and fill it out and had someone immediately contact me after. Thank you again, Robert, for joining us. It was incredibly helpful, really practical information for our listeners. And to our audience, this is exactly the kind of member-focused resource the ASA is continuing to build. helping you navigate not just clinical practice, but the business and personal aspects of your career as well. So thank you all for joining us on Central Line. Be sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Hello, ASA. I'm Dr. Patrick Guillaume, your ASA president, and this is the Monday Morning Minute. First, our legislative conference is coming up May 18th through 20th in Washington, D.C. With rapidly changing political dynamics and upcoming midterm elections, your engagement matters now more than ever. Register through your state component society today, and I hope to see you in D.C. Next, ASA launched a new webpage addressing anesthesia and genetic neurologic mortality risks. The page includes global society statements, peer-reviewed publications, and patient videos in both English and Spanish. And last, April was National Stress Awareness Month. ASA is here for you with resources to help you manage burnout and improve your well-being. ASA's Safe Haven program offers confidential support for mental health and work-life balance with benefits for you and your family members. Also, check out the resources on our website from the ASA Committee on Physician Well-Being. That's it for now. I hope you'll follow us on your favorite social media channels and check out my weekly Monday morning outreach.
For more detailed and timely information, don't miss Dr. Guillaume's Monday morning outreach email delivered exclusively to ASA members' inboxes every Monday at 5 a.m. Eastern. As the driving force behind safe, quality patient care, you demonstrate extraordinary skill, compassion, and dedication every day, and you're even stronger when backed by your powerful anesthesia community. ASA membership connects you to thousands of established and emerging leaders who understand your challenges, align with your commitment, and amplify your voice. Our collective impact makes an important difference in your own practice while giving you the opportunity to shape the future of peri-operative care. Enjoy your full range of member benefits at asahq.org/benefits. Subscribe to Central Line today, wherever you get your podcasts, or visit asahq.org/podcasts for more.